stop the presses, folks, because your president, K.O.E., has returned to you, and I am bringing you something very special this evening. A returning figure to the K.O.E. Nation, the beard of knowledge himself, the one, the only, Icowrich. How are we doing this evening, sir? Folks, Ico here is my nominee for the head of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. There's multiple reasons for this, and we're going to get into that. One of them is my attempt to reach across the aisle to the other side, and also because I know Ico is very well read, very well studied, and knows what's going on in this particular subject. So I invited him on this evening. He needs his charger, though, folks, all right. Now, all righty. Welcome back, Ico. First, why don't you introduce the folks to yourself, let them know who you are, and then we can get right into the meat of this matter, the future of the EPA. It will be the K.O.E.P.A. It's going to be an amazing. Okay. It's going to be an amazing time. So,
what does K.O.E. stand for again? I forget.
K.O.E. King of Extreme. Yes, that's why I always say.
In this case, it would be King of the EPA.
Yes. King of Environment.
K.E. Yeah.
The Extreme Protection Agency. There's a lot of fun you can have with this. But yes, that's why I always say, you're King of Extreme, Phil, K.O.E. And it's always kind of fun. Gotcha. Like sometimes people catch it, sometimes they don't.
Yeah, I never have.
With all that, Ico, why don't you introduce the people to yourself, who you are, just a little bit?
Okay. So my name's Icowrich. It's from a knock knock joke. Do you know the knock knock joke? Have we talked about that?
I don't remember.
It's impatient cow. Do you know that one? Okay, we'll do it. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Impatient cow.
Impatient cow. Who? All right. And I like it. I'm sure I've heard. There's some iteration of that I've had in the playground. I'm sure, like now I've heard that. So
there's it's from a circle of friends of mine. So like I'm Icowrich. There's an Icow Dave. There's other Icows.
Nice. Yeah, I like it. So, all righty. Now, another reason that I want you, sir, to be my head of the EPA is because you and I go back and forth on energy quite a bit. And even though I do not agree with you on many things,
right,
you always come with your homework. And to that's something I can always respect. You always do your homework. You're always coming with, there's reason behind your reason. And so that's something that I always look for. And also another thing that, given the fact that you are very Christian, I think that's easy to say. I think that's fair to say.
I'm not sure about the very, but I'm Catholic. Yeah.
You are probably better than most of the deep state Congress critters in DC would understand the idea that the Lord put us here to be good stewards of the earth as well. And so that's something that you would probably understand a little bit,
right?
A little bit better than the average Congress critter, if you will. But now, with all that being said, I've set the table here a little bit, but I'm going to let you get into what would your head prerogatives be as head of the EPA, and then we'll start to banter back and forth, because you got to remember, you are going to be serving under a Republican president.
Oh, I'm very aware of that. Yeah, I would absolutely. So here's the way I look at energy. One of the things, the very first thing I teach, so I'm a debate coach.
Yes, I want to get into that later.
One of the things that we do is, because we know that the debate topic varies. It can vary. It can be Lincoln Douglas debate where you get a new topic every 2 months. It can be a cross-examination debate where you get the same topic for a year. Or there's other ones where the topic changes with every debate. And so what we have to do is we have to specialize our knowledge as the debate squad and into areas that we think might be relevant to a topic. So there might be like 4 or 5 things that we specialize in. And then if we pull a particular topic, or if we have to respond to a particular topic, we know we can move the debate in the direction of the things that we know the most about. And so one of the things that touches on a lot of our different potential topics you could get at a debate tournament is energy policy. And so the first thing I do is I teach them something that I call energy Jenga. And energy Jenga is this. There are 3 kinds of power generation, right? There's something called baseline, which is what coal is, right? And if that's something that can produce, or in nuclear is baseline, it can produce a lot of energy that it can support a big area. It's very reliable. It's very consistent, but you can't ramp it up or down really fast the way you might need to. And that's called baseline energy. Okay. Then you've got something called dispatchable energy. And dispatchable energy is energy that you can like turn up and down on a dime. Natural gas, for instance. You can just turn a spigot and with a half an hour, you're at full capacity. You turn that spigot down, you could be down to like a third capacity or off entirely within 30 minutes, which is considered a pretty fast response time for ramping. And so that's called dispatchable energy. Okay. And the third one is called you could call it variable energy or energy that just goes up and down a lot. You can call it variable. And,
fluctuating energy.
Yeah. It all has to do with reliable energy. That's energy that's not considered reliable on the grid. But it might be useful in other ways. And one of the main ways that it's useful is that it's really cheap. So that's wind and solar, for instance. Wind and solar are very cheap, but the wind might die, clouds might go over some solar panels, things like that. So you get variability in energy. So one of the things that you can do in this energy.
So what are those three classifications again?
So baseline, dispatchable, and base load, dispatchable, and variable. So what you want really is, if you have variable energy, you need something that I call counter variable, which is also called dispatchable. So if you build, for instance, a bunch of wind and solar, well, one thing is if you build wind and solar together, one of the things that we know is that wind dies down at a different time of the day than solar dies down. Mm-hmm. So already there, you get increased reliability if you combine wind and solar in an area. But you still need something that's dispatchable and reliable, something that you can turn up quickly when you need it, and that's natural gas. Okay, so generally renewables and natural gas pair well together. And with energy Jenga, anytime a debater might get up and say, let's do this kind of energy, let's invest heavily in solar, for instance. Well, immediately, if you know energy Jenga, okay, they're going to need dispatchable energy of some kind. That might mean batteries. That might mean hydro or pumped hydro. It might mean natural gas, that sort of thing. And if the other debaters haven't planned the things that get displaced by the thing that they're advocating for, then they're going to lose that debate as soon as you start pointing out, okay, these are the consequences of putting a whole bunch of solar in this area, that sort of thing.
Interesting.
Same thing with nuclear, right? So if someone just says, hey, go build nuclear, well, if there's a bunch of wind and solar in that area, nuclear is not going to pair well with it, because when the wind dies down, you can't make the plutonium all of a sudden produce twice the energy. It just doesn't work, or the uranium, whatever it's using. And you can't, you also can't, if there's just a ton of really cheap, this is a problem we had in Texas. Once we invested in wind and energy started getting really cheap during long sections of the day, what that meant was that our nuclear plants, which had built-in assumptions as to what they could sell their power for, they didn't figure for the fact that when wind is high in Texas, they weren't going to make any money. So now our nuclear reactors are making way, way, way less money, because our regulators in Texas weren't playing energy Jenga correctly. Doesn't mean we don't need nuclear. We absolutely do need nuclear, but we need to figure out how to pair it in a way that works. So
interesting.
The reason I say that.
Go ahead.
The reason I say that is because if I'm going to be serving under a Republican president, one of the things that you have to get used to in the world of energy is everything's a negotiation. So, a lot of people, especially a lot of greenies, they have one solution in mind in their heads, and they're just like, we need renewables, nothing but renewables. Let's get rid of everything else, something like that. Or you might have nuclear bros that think we just should have nuclear everywhere and not invest in anything else. And the problem with that, there's a couple of problems with that. But one of the problems that I would run into working under you would be that my idea of the perfect grid is going to be different from your idea of the perfect grid, or more importantly, like the people who got you in office, where you get most of your backing from, they're going to have certain interests that have to be catered to. So even though I do like
But
nuclear,
also keep in mind, one of the reasons I am nominating you is a very big reach across the aisle, give me to the Democrats, the left. Like, it's like, okay, if you can't work with me and this guy, then you just can't work with me.
Right.
And that's kind of like what and so I'm giving you a bit more leash, a little bit more slack on the leash than I would be giving other heads of departments, because I really like what I'm hearing on the what I call energy Jenga. Now, you got to remember, us Republicans, we love the baseline energy. That first one, you like because it's reliable. You can count on it. It's kind of like my great grandfather. He was reluctant to adopt tractors because he'd say, no, that technology, it breaks. But your horse, you can rely on that. And so that's part of the thinking. And I do appreciate the fact that you're like, well, okay, we're not going to be able to just cut out coal, fossil fuel, and all because it's the fine people of Texas, the fine oil drillers of Texas, the great, salt of the earth, miners up in the Dakotas. These are folks, and fossil fuel is fucking reliable, whether we like it or not. It's just reliable. It just works. And now the thing is that I like what I'm hearing about how these powers can supplement each other and work together. And so that I would give quite a bit more leeway. Now, obviously, love me some coal power. You can always fire up coal whenever. Now, the clean coal stuff, like you always hear about that, to my understanding, not enough facilities are actually retrofitted for that. Like, that's kind of my understanding.
I'm sorry, you say that again? What form of energy are you talking about?
Coal, where they talk about clean coal. It's to my understanding that not enough facilities are retrofitted for because there are working clean, but yes. And so
clean coal works. It's just too expensive.
Well, it's one of those, the government in terms of power, I don't like the idea of picking winners and losers, because that kind of feels like we're kind of like, to me, like some of the investments in wind, from what I've seen here in the Midwest and having to see all the, like, it seems somewhat arbitrary. It seemed like it was just kind of like a greenwashing. The Obama administration kind of, oh, look at us, look at all the green stuff we did for you, even though there wasn't really a push for it, especially in these small rural areas. And so it's one of those things that I like what I'm hearing from you with a Jenga effect, but like, to me, like when you talk about like, there's just no market for coal. Like, I don't know. There's plenty of coal plants that are working. There's plenty of places where this goes. But now to shift one slight gear here, what I do like about your debate tactic is like just going back to your, always mastering energy.
Right.
It reminds me of Ron Paul when he was running for president in 2008, 2012. What he would do is it didn't matter what the hell you were talking about. He could always bring it back to sound money. Because money and energy pretty much is involved with everything. Didn't matter if you were talking about the war, if you're talking about gay marriage, if you're talking about whatever. He could like Cato the Elder, circle that shit back to sound. If we just had sound money, it would just fix it all. And by the end of it, he's damn near sold you on the idea of, maybe we should have a gold standard.
And you can do both too. Like crypto is both energy and money.
Yeah, and it's going to be eventually the energy that's taken to actually create these cryptos is going to be reflected in the price. Like I had a buddy of mine that was joking that he wanted to create a cryptocurrency, but he wanted to hook up the computer that was making it to a diesel engine.
Right.
So he could say that every single one of these cryptos was made with goddamn diesel power. Goddamn, like, cause he's a trucker, loves diesel. So when he talks about power, and I talk about power and energy with him a lot, and he's like, a lot of people don't understand. It's diesel fuel that decides the price of everything. Because if we don't have enough diesel, shit doesn't move anymore. The tractors don't move. The trucks don't move. The equipment doesn't move. The things don't get mined. The things don't get gathered, and shit just slows down. And
I'll get to that because there's something called biodiesel, and I'm for it.
Yes, it's I'm for it, but it's one of those things in like true semi-diesel engines. I've like my trucker buddy, he would like just like
No, you would need to
recoil in
re-engineer.
horror.
You wouldn't use the exact same. I mean, I'm saying I like biodiesel for like new trucks that are made for it. I wouldn't necessarily use it in existing trucks unless there was some way to retrofit existing engines.
Okay, because like my buddy, he was explaining it to me. It's like, with ethanol and diesel, it's like, okay, biodiesel, you should absolutely positively never run it in your semi if it's wintertime. If it's in the cold dead of winter, don't do it. It's going to gum up everything and you're going to be just stuck there. But during the summer, you're probably all right with blending a little biodiesel into, your and so it's just kind of one of those, like, when you understand the mechanics of it, it's like, okay, like biodiesel in North Dakota in January, probably not a good idea. You can probably get away with blending it off a little bit in Florida, but like that's just one thing that, like, when you're talking about biodiesel, I love the concept because I'm a corn and soybean farmer. So like, yeah,
of course.
So I love the idea.
That's
of being
why
able
it was
to
on my
provide
list.
fuel. Yes, but it's just
to appeal to your business interests.
Oh, well, I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, and this is why he's such a master debater, folks. had to sneak that one in there.
I was given, hold on a second. I was given a Christmas present.
All righty. What do you got?
This is what I was given for Christmas.
Certified master debater. Nice. Well done.
Yeah.
He master debates.
I have yet to wear it, though.
At least 15, 20 times a day, he master debates.
That's right.
Everybody's like, they're all starting to get worried. But like, so I was just telling folks, like, I like the idea of biodiesel, particularly the ones that are derived from soy. There's some folks who are trying to work with corn. And then I was telling, like, okay, spirulina algae, folks, like, I get it, but no. Like, just no. It's like you're getting that much production off the top of every single pond, and you have to use all the water, and we need fresh water for a lot more stuff. So it's just one of those, like, I get it. It, like, maybe when we're exploring the stars, we can start using algae for everything. But while we're here on Earth, we gotta be really, really careful with our water, and that's something that we'll get into here a little bit later. Sure. But before we get into that, biodiesel, what is your thoughts on biodiesel, and is there anything that you would want to mandate, or what's your thoughts on, like, because me, corn farmer, like, you'll love this. I was talking to a very Republican friend of mine who's also a corn farmer, and he was joking, like, man, if Biden just mandates like E25 across the whole nation, hell, I might even vote for him. And so, like, it was a joke. It was like, he wasn't very serious, but like, so no, I my self-interest, yes, I'm definitely for ethanol and biodiesel, but I also do acknowledge that they're not perfect cures. They're not the silver bullet, if you will, because there's issues with its effects on engines.
They're part of the transportation Jenga.
Yes, because
it's a whole different thing.
Well, it's easily retrofittable. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just like ethanol is a great example. It's like, it's renewable. It's part of the carbon chain, if you will. But it's you can retrofit it into all of our cars. I can fill a Ford Mustang from 1960 whatever with E15, and it might not be perfect on it, but it will go vroom vroom and go forward. And so that's a huge advantage to ethanol and biodiesel. So yes, biodiesel, I'm a huge proponent of it, but I also don't look at it with rose-colored glasses. There's going to be quite a bit of conflict to come with that.
Right. Yeah. So no. Like I said, like, there's a transportation Jenga too, and because we'll get to that, because that's going to involve a conversation about EVs and about potentially hydrogen fuel cells, as well as energy efficiency at different levels for the vehicles that won't be going battery. Like, I don't like, for instance, I don't like battery for long haul trucking. I just don't think it makes sense. So you've got to figure out a way to, like, minimize the impact. for those long haul shipments or whatever. I think diesel can be a part of that solution, but again, not the entire solution.
Yeah,
But we'll get to that when we get to transportation.
Okay. So what is the next item on the agenda, sir?
Well, okay, so we had baseload, right?
Yes.
Let's just talk about that. It's coal, natural gas, and nuclear. Now, here's the thing about coal. It releases toxins in urban areas, especially that at concentrations or actually, no, not urban areas, in areas around coal plants, where you get increases in various cardiovascular diseases, pulmonary diseases, and cancer, and asthma. And so, if you can get your baseload from somewhere else, even if it's natural gas doesn't have those same toxins. So already, like, even if you're not looking at like the impact of greenhouse gas releases, if you're just looking at toxins in the air that people breathe in, and the effect that coal has on groundwater in terms of how, and when the water goes through the coal ash and it ends up in the rivers, you've seen all those documentaries of what happens to coal ash when it's mishandled, and it's very often mishandled. Then the benefits you get.
Just between you and me, as a farmer, I can actually, I've seen it myself. The corn and soy fields that are really close to coal plants,
right,
actually yield pretty good because there's more carbon. There's more carbon in the soil. But so the idea that shit doesn't get around, like, I've seen it myself. It
definitely gets around. Yeah. And what that gets around also in the air, and people breathe it in. So if you look, especially around coal plants, people who live around there, they get all of these added costs. And if you calculate the costs of savings that you get just from reduced use of the healthcare system in those areas, at that point, I think you can use that to justify going to a different baseload. So yeah, I understand a lot of greenies will immediately say, let's replace our coal with renewables. Well, that doesn't make sense because coal is a baseload. So you're not replacing the same thing with the same thing. But nuclear is baseload. So there's no reason you can't go into an area that's heavily dependent on coal plants and replace it with nuclear energy. The only problem is it takes a long time to build the suckers, and they're expensive.
Yeah, you and I have been sparring back and forth about the time that it takes to build these nuclear plants. And to me, that is one of the things, as head of the EPA, I'm going to need you to cut so much of the nuclear red tape to allow the building to actually advance a little fast. Because from some of the building that I've been watching and some of the it seems to be a lot of regulatory red tape that's getting in the way. And to me, that feels like the government picking winners and losers again.
Well, sure. But if it's safety regs and they're responding to, now here's the other thing. If you look at all the nuclear accidents around the world, it's nothing compared to the number of people who die from coal when it operates without an accident. So to that extent, I think that the risk of taking a second look at regulations for existing nuclear power plants could make sense. I think that'd be something that your potential Secretary of Energy could do. But I would that's an area of negotiation for me, because I think that the only way nuclear is going to work is if it's government funded or heavily subsidized by the government. I think ideally we could do what France does, which is just the government builds the plants.
Now, this is going to be a very shocking thing for you to hear from a Republican president. So I'm going to get The conversion of fuel to energy is what dictates the totality of life on this planet. If it's literally what supports the 7 billion odd people on this planet and all of the wildlife that we manage, is the conversion of fuel to energy. And if that is interrupted for any reason, millions of people around the world will die. And so to me, if we are to actually run the ship of state, and like I believe the state is there to provide three basic things, if we're going to have one at all, it should give youth a future, men and women a chance to work, and old age a security. And amongst that, we need to be able to convert fuel to energy however it's done. So the idea of the government throwing a little money around to ensure that the continual, nonstop, everlasting conversion of fuel to energy will never be stopped here in the great US of A would be one of the greatest legacies I, as the President of the United States, could ever give to this country. So I'm not afraid of subsidizing energy here and there if we can make sure that the flow is ever constant.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would be good. So that's my negotiation is I would like for it to be entirely government owned and operated, just like France. But because that's how they did it, that's how you can make it happen fast. And when I say fast, we're still talking 10 years. But
I was about to say, within a decade is fast, like lightning fast in terms of changing
nuclear.
energy
That would
policy.
be lightning fast, especially if you're looking to scale it to such an extent that we have nuclear, basically in every major city. So that would be number one. The other piece of negotiation that I would have is you want to offset the cost somehow. Well, you have two problems. You need to offset the cost, and you also need to be able to get some projects done quickly so that we can continue to increase our capacity over time. And the only way you can do that is by building things that can be built fast. And the fastest and cheapest thing to build right now is wind and solar. So you need those things. But that also means you need natural gas as a transition fuel. And when I say transition fuel, what I'm saying is we try to phase out coal entirely. Natural gas, we scale up until nuclear power plants start coming online. And then we allow the nuclear power plants to bring natural gas down. And at the same time, because natural gas isn't just baseload. Natural gas is a special kind of fuel. It's both baseload and dispatchable. So you also need something that can displace what natural gas does there. And to me, the best technology for that is pumped hydro. So let me tell you about an example. We had the biggest battery in the world built in the 1970s. It's called the Bath County Pumped Hydro Station. And it was there to support coal plants, because here's the problem with baseline. Baseline's great. It's reliable. It powers everybody. But when one coal plant goes down, you're in fucking trouble. So what they did is they built this massive, and I mean massive, biggest battery in the world, pumped hydro station in the 1970s, so that when one coal plant would go down for maintenance, it could provide power for months if it had to. For that entire region around like Virginia and West Virginia.
Because what a lot of people don't know is that the creation of power is one thing. As a species, we are hysterically bad at storing power.
Yeah,
like that's that. Like,
and
just
this is one like not really new way of storing power is pumped hydro, which is just all that is that you pump water up into like on top of the hill somewhere where you've got a big lake, and this is a massive lake, and then when you need the power, you pump it back down.
Mm-hmm.
So you pump it up with coal power, you pump it down with gravity. You let it become gravity, yeah. And so coal's going away in West Virginia and Virginia even. But what you can do there is you can surround the Bath County station with as much wind and solar as you want, because you're surrounding a massive battery. So you could really supply like the 5-state area just with wind and solar because of that pumped hydro station. So those are your two kinds of power. You have dispatchable pumped hydro with batteries that can that are designed to pick up power for a couple of seconds while you're transitioning from one to another. Mm-hmm. And then as much solar as you can around that. That's one type of power. And then you do nuclear for your baseline in other parts of the world, and you make them interoperable so that if a nuclear power plant goes down, it can use some of that power from the other form that's nearby, and you just like pepper the country with that. That would be what I would do.
Interesting. Now, one thing, like you're going to say this is a little more in the purview of your energy secretary, but like this is also like there's a reason, like there's certain, like if there's any environmental regulations that need to be cut, this is like
right.
For me,
that would be the EPA. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, for me, the one thing that I think, like, to me, it's like I get it. Solar's nice. But like I'm looking at it as like I'm trying to view myself as a person outside of time, and it's cheap, but it's also like again, kind of like our battery technology, hysterically primitive. And so like if there's any sort of construction or any kind of environmental issues with that, like I would need, because what I want is the kind of solar panels that can eventually be taken out to space in the most harsh parts of the vacuum and can even get hit with different debris from outer space and still generate power. So that's, to me, that will be the golden age of solar. Here in the 2020s, 30s, and 40s is, well, yeah. And so if there's any kind of regulatory red tape in terms of the environment, I need you to cut that now.
I tell you, because okay, let me give you an example of something I would cut down because I think it's dumb. And that is there's a ban on NASA launching things into space with that's powered by nuclear because they're afraid it might blow up on launch and then you're sending, uranium, plutonium, whatever, like out, into the atmosphere or whatever. Because they're afraid of that. I think that's dumb. First of all, the risk of a launch explosion is very low. But secondly,
submarines.
They've developed a technology now to where you could launch it into the air, blow it up on purpose, and it will land intact in this like sphere that's just unbreakable. And you could open it up and everything will be intact. So I don't think there's any risk of that. I think we should be sending shit into space. Like there's a reason Voyager 1 and 2 are both still transmitting from outside of the heliopause right now. And that's because they're powered, by they're nuclear powered. So,
well, then, yeah, that one has to go. Like that'll be probably one of your first day things. Like you can just sign that one first day because
there's people who've already drafted that, those rule changes. You could just put it on.
Yeah. But I don't see that being a big priority for Biden because nobody wants to go to space. I like in my administration will be obsessed with it. Like it will be one of my primary things. Like, okay, we've got this massive, like biblical scale military industrial defense budget. And if we just put and all we got to do is say, hey guys, you get the high ground.
Right.
If you go up there, you have the high ground. You don't even need missiles. Just point a big tungsten rod at whatever city you want, let it go, and gravity does the rest for you. Okay. And so but yeah, the idea that we're going to get around the solar system on, people like to call it rocket fuel. Well, I know enough, that's compressed kerosene. Okay. We're not going to get around the solar system on compressed kerosene.
Right.
Okay. We're going to need some nuclear. And now all of that is getting to, and we'll get to this a little later. My big eventual push for fusion energy. That's going to be my biggest push because that's how we get the cheap power and the fast spaceships. And to me, the thing, I've always understood your argument, but to me, after the 5-second fusion reaction that we had mid last year, I was like, okay, it's just literally we are actually just a few years away. It's an engineering issue. And then all this other stuff, coal, wind, solar, nuclear, it's all just a nicety after that. It's all just something we talk about as kind of trivia because once that happens, even our environmental problems largely go away. And so that's why I'm such a big proponent of it. And I'm sure there's not going to be no, fuck that fusion. But to me, I think we're very, very close to it. And so that's something that needs to be considered in all of your investments is, can this be recycled or retrofitted in about 15 years?
Yeah. I mean, well, I think if we had fusion, I would need to know more of the details on what the cost and scalability are. I think that's something that that your energy secretary Soyadel would need to deal with, and I'm sure he has opinions on it. Although I will say this, Soyadel is an advocate of traditional nuclear. So he's not even an SMR guy. He wants to take the nuclear powers that exist now, fund them now, propagate them everywhere. And his argument is we're all, you've heard this a million times. We're always 5 years away from something miraculous and it never happens. And he doesn't believe that it'll never happen. He's just saying that while we're waiting for it to happen, we should be using the shit we have now, which means we should be building out traditional nuclear power plants that are large scale, that can displace a lot of fossil fuels and be reliable. And so I think that would be my position too. Whatever funding you could, that could be made available for researching that would happen on the DOE side. I would support all of that funding because I would want to get to that better world. It's just that I wouldn't want to put too much shit on hold while we're waiting for that.
Okay, understandable. So, but basically, the last thing I want is EPA agents going into Jeff Bezos' fusion reactor place. Like, I don't know about all this. We better shut this down. Like
Right.
that's one of those. Like, I'm willing to make an omelet. I'm willing to break a few eggs. Okay,
Right.
like that's like I'm willing to bend a few things to get to fusion within our lifetime, because then the golden age of humanity is here. And so that's why, like, to me, I'm so optimistic about it. But I also understand it's an old phrase around here, and I'm sure you've heard of it. One in the hand is worth two in the bush.
Yeah, sure.
Like a lot of people don't know, like having one dead bird in your hand is worth two alive birds out in the bush that you still got to go get and might not get, could still get away from you. And so that's so to you, I think you kind of view wind and solar as an imperfect one in the hand. Like there's problems, and like to me it's mostly due to the primitiveness of some of our technology. Like I just understand if we put ourselves outside of time, us as a species, we don't even know how cells divide yet. We're very primitive. And so like I put a lot of that to, and so that's why I'm still so pro coal, because it's something that works. It's not perfect. There's a lot of problems with it, but you can build a coal powered plant in Antarctica, put a big old pile of coal next to it, and it'll start generating power. And so like that's one of those. And when we talk about we need to get rid of coal, well, China's taken all the coal. And they're making all the shit with coal power. And so that's another problem. Now, it's not much you can do about that. Like you'll have to talk to Secretary of State Tiberius about what can be done about that. But that's my big problem.
Okay, so here's where I do agree that we should cut a lot of red tape on. And that is and this is something that the current administration is doing too. So this might be something synergistic, because he's done two things. One is he made the EV subsidies such that you have to get 50% of your materials from within the United States. So you don't get those subsidies if most of your materials come from China or Africa or South America. So we're talking, like rare earth minerals and lithium and cobalt, things like that. Second thing he's done is he's used the Defense Production Act to force more mining in places like Nevada, where you can get a lot of lithium, and places like Colorado where you can get a lot of cobalt. And so the third thing that I would do that I'm not aware has been done yet is but I think Trump has done some of this. So I think there's some synergy with the Trump administration here, and that is to relax mining regulations on anything that is deemed necessary for our defense. So like this would be like a defense authorization. And I would say that
everything from uranium all the way down to rhodium.
Yeah. All of that stuff we should have a way of getting it from within the United States, so that we're not importing that, or not. Like I don't necessarily mind importing that stuff, but I do think that we need to have the infrastructure available such that if any of those sources dry up, we still have like a way of mining it.
Yeah, like I like what I'm hearing there about like kind of easing up the regulations on local mining. The one thing about the subsidy issue is like this is just the way I kind of view it. Like right now, the rare earths are kind of like the ammunition to our computer digital war, and to all of the electricity and power generation, and to the rare earths are like, I mean, fuck, they're in these things. They're in everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And so to me, I feel like it's almost kind of like cutting off a source of ammunition. And so, and now I get it's not sourced in the most ethical way. That I totally get, and I totally understand.
That's another thing, is that whatever regulations we cut within the United States, that displaces mining that's happening elsewhere in the world, where the ethics are much, much worse. Like we're not going to have child labor in Nevada mines.
Very true, very true. So that ever the salesman here, ever the salesman, Ico. than pay the Native American tribes. That is a whole other issue, and I will have to figure out who I will have to put as the head of Native Affairs here in the United States, but that's a different issue. Today is ICO, and now there's going to be times when that's an issue. Remember when that pipeline was going through one of the Dakotas, and the tribes were not happy? I think that's a fair way to put it. They were.
I'm pro pipeline, but that's a problem. Yeah, for sure. That's a problem.
Now, to me, I'm pro pipeline so long as it's something that actually floats up in groundwater, because the Keystone XL pipeline, the shale oil that was going to pass through there, that actually sinks, and that was going to be a real problem for the Ogallala Aquifer. And so that is
that's another thing.
That's a ham-fisted segue.
It's true. I'm pro pipeline, but I do have issues also with the tar sands, because the amount of energy that it takes to clean it. It's only viable when oil is over $80 a barrel or something like that, because of all of the intense energy that it takes to produce it. Shale oil is considered reasonably expensive. It's between $60 and $80, but the tar sands, the only reason they want to do it is because they've already created the infrastructure. So the marginal cost of producing from it is not that high. But if you factor in the cost of having created all of that infrastructure around those tar pits, it's some cost, and they want to make their money back.
Well, unfortunately, it's if you look at there's a reason Keystone wanted to go all the way down to Texas. It's because your commodity isn't worth anything until it can get to a port. Yeah. When you get it to a port, now you can actually trade it on the international futures market.
Okay, here's where I flipped from Obama to Trump. Ooh. You're going to like this. Because I used to be for the petroleum export ban, and then the Republicans wanted to export it because they wanted, obviously they had donors that wanted to make money, and I was against that, because the more oil that you keep in the United States that gets produced, the less expensive gas is for Americans. So that's why I was against the petroleum export ban, which also applied to natural gas. But now that we our NATO allies are in this crunch from the Russian sanctions, we really do need to be able to export this oil and gas to the Europeans, so that the alliance can survive. So I flipped on that. I'm for the Trump policy now, not the Obama.
Well, yeah. All right. I knew there was a reason why you'd be perfect for the job, because kind of like the rare earths, oil is kind of ammunition.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's whether we like it or not.
It's really strange that our oil diplomacy is about exports now, not about imports.
What's that?
The oil diplomacy, the fuel diplomacy that America has always done, is we've always tried to secure the best supply from the Middle East or whatever. But now, because shale has gotten so well developed, now we're exporting oil. Now we're using it to help our allies. The politics of oil in the world has fundamentally changed because of shale development.
So so now we're getting to greater understanding here, because to me, I just view all of it as just the world's stuff. Yeah. And whether we like it or not, the world's stuff is kind of how we position ourselves. And because under President K.O.E., let me tell you, there'd be so much stuff in Ukraine. Ukraine would actually be invading Russia. Okay, so, folks, that's how hard it would be with the stuff. But we got to organize the stuff right. So if we don't do that, because I've often said the earth isn't overpopulated or anything like that, it's just very badly managed. And that will change here soon. But now there's a couple more things I wanted to touch on with you, and we kind of ham-fisted segued into it. Groundwater.
Yeah.
As head of the EPA, I'm a farmer. I get my drinking water from the largest natural freshwater aquifer in the world, the Ogallala Aquifer. I have heard many farmers call themselves the sons and daughters of Ogallala.
There's another thing I thought about is, will it matter that I voted against you in the election?
Might hurt my feelings a little bit, but No, like there's a reason why I'm appointing you to the position that I am, because the EPA, it's very powerful, but it's also like it's powerful but limited. It's kind of like the ATF. You know what I mean? Like it's powerful, but it's in this very slim area. And you've done your homework, and there needs to be some advancements done in how we get energy around, and putting a green loving lefty like yourself
Yeah.
in the EPA is also my, like, kind of reaching out to the Democrats on a couple of things, because like hell, as a like it, we'll get into this later, but I as a Republican know how the Democrats could actually get to national health care, Medicare for all within a couple of years, but we'll get into that a little later. So
Although to be honest, like if it's you versus Trump, you got my vote.
Well, I'll ship all the guns. Oh, okay. Duly noted. Duly noted. If it's me versus Trump, then Ico's. Yeah, I'm voting for you, Phil. Vote for. But no, that would be actually.
Where are you getting these comments? I'm not seeing this on your Twitch.
Oh, these are on YouTube.
Oh,
Chicanadar is on YouTube, because you see, I'm a man that's too big for just one platform.
Okay,
So
I got you. All right, hold on. Let me go. I'm gonna switch over there just so I can see the because there's no commenting on Twitch right now.
Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, I'm just I'm fascinated to hear what it is that your plans are for groundwater protection.
Okay, here's number one is I would have to know who your who your NASA head is, because as far as groundwater protection, there's one program that I think is like critical for making everything else work. And that is, have you ever heard of the GRACE satellites, or have I talked to you about the GRACE pair satellites?
I don't think you
They're
have.
amazing. So what it is it's two satellites that are orbiting the Earth, and they're constantly measuring exactly where they are above the Earth. And so let's see if I can find something. All right, yeah. Because I'm messy, I've got no, that's not it. So yeah, okay. Let's pretend these two pens are exactly alike, and
Okay.
they're orbiting the Earth like this, and they're measuring with lasers the distance between each other, and they're also measuring exactly where each of them is above the Earth. This passes the front satellite passes over the Earth at a particular moment in time, and then the other one follows like a few minutes later, maybe. And what they're measuring is the gravity waves underneath them. And the way they can tell what the gravity waves are is if they're passing over a part of the Earth that has more mass than another, it's going to slightly reposition one of the two satellites in relation to each other.
Oh dear.
And as a result, they can map the gravity waves of the Earth. And there's only one thing that moves around on Earth that's in motion that has enough gravity to change gravity waves, and that's water. So if there's a drought in a particular area, the mass of that area will fall. And so they'll be able to tell how much groundwater there is at any given point on Earth. So like one of the things that they've known for a long time now, because of the GRACE pair satellites, is that California is losing groundwater at tremendous rates. So they're able to like basically sense the cavitation that's happening in areas that could be holding large amounts of water. Or when they go over Greenland, they can tell that it's losing a tremendous amount of surface ice, like land ice, because they can tell the mass that's underneath them of that ice. So we used to measure things like ice loss just by taking a picture and saying, oh, look, like, there's less ice now because it's moved inland or something like that. But they've never been able to tell how much ice that was. Was it an inch of ice? Was it like 5 feet of ice? Was it, half a mile of ice? They don't know, because you can't tell from a picture. But you can tell by measuring the gravity waves. So that thing launched. It was called, I forgot what it was called, but it was great. Well, it's the GRACE satellite launched, and then it was replaced after about 10 years with something called GRACE FO, and it's about halfway through its 10-year mission or whatever.
I was about to say that laser technology is almost the exact same laser technology that I have on a couple of my Haggy rollers for the tasseling season. This mic here is a perfect demonstration. It's two lasers.
Yeah.
And if these lasers
Mhm.
are cut off, it'll keep going up, it'll raise the roller, and then if
Oh, yeah.
these two lasers connect,
Mhm.
it'll drop back down. And
Yeah.
it's really simple laser technology, and that's actually how corn gets detasseled by machine,
Oh, nice.
is by that laser technology. So when you were explaining that to me, I was like, I'm thinking to myself, dude, that is like 3 weeks every year of my life during summer is this laser technology. Like, you
Yeah.
have no, I totally get it, and that's fucking brilliant. And so, like, yeah, that is very, and so we're
So
finding
anyway, my
new
argument
ways to
is we
find.
need a follow-on. So there's something called the Grace follow-on. It's about halfway through its mission. When it's done, we need to make sure that thing gets replaced every 10 years, because it's very important that we be able to track where groundwater is, so that any other program that the EPA is working on that's related to groundwater, or the Department of Agriculture would also have a strong interest in this, they're going to need to do that. So I think that's number one.
Like, to me, that sounds like not just for national security, but also for worldwide data. That
Yeah.
almost sounds like something that should probably be part of the DoD budget. Like, you know what I mean? Like that.
Yes.
That's how much we need, because that's just part of national security, world security, and
Yes.
just general species survival.
Yeah, let me give you an example. There used to be a myth about something called the Northwest Passage. And
Oh,
the reason I say it was a myth was because everyone tried it over and over and over again. They could never find it. Well, now every summer for 3 solid months, cruise ships go through the Northwest Passage, like on a regular basis. They don't even need icebreakers anymore, because that's how much like melted ice there is in the summer, and that season gets longer by the year. So an area that used to be of no interest to any of the countries that are surrounding it suddenly are. Now, here's the difference between Canadian policy and American policy. America operated under the assumption that global warming isn't real. So we were not developing the legal framework to claim land that we should be claim, or not land, claim the rights to certain passageways up there that we should have. Canada, on the other hand, for decades has been laying the groundwork for those kinds of claims, and so has Russia. So we've got a lot of catching up to do, because those areas, like oil companies now want to drill there. Cruise ships are constantly sort of going through there. Certain military vessels now are cruising it on a regular basis, and the Russians are going places where I don't think they should be allowed to go. And so I think what we need to do is work on our projections as to where those passages are going to be and how that area is going to change over time, which means we can't, because this is defense, we can't allow the defense to be politicized when it comes to this sort of thing. Here's an example, too, from the private sector. When these kinds of arguments were happening, I was always looking at insurance companies. What is it that they'll insure? What will they not insure? Or what prices are going up because they think there's an increased risk? Because for them, politics doesn't enter into it. For them, it's a dollar and cents decision. If they price it too high, their competitors are going to undercut them. If they underestimate global warming and they price it too low, then they're going to have too many payouts and they're going to go bankrupt. So, like, for them, they have no room for ideology. They have to get it right. And I think when it comes to the Department of Defense working with the EPA, I think we have to get it right because it's going to affect our territorial claims.
Now, like, to me, it's like, now, Ico, you're going to hate this person. Like, all right, keep in mind, you're going to be working for a Republican administration. So you're going to have to become what I call a climate change agnostic. It's like, I've never seen climate change, but I have faith that it exists.
Here's what I'll do. Here's what I'll do. I mean, here's what I've been doing. Like, when I told you that my reason for getting rid of coal, I wasn't talking about climate change, even though I absolutely think that that's a risk, and that's something that I would try to convince you of in the administration. But there's this thing that David Brin, David Brin, science fiction author.
What did he write? He sounds familiar.
Wrote, his biggest one was the Uplift series.
Okay. Yeah.
He has something called TWOTA, which is things we ought to be doing anyway. And so what he says is, okay, here's all the stuff we need to do about climate change, But if you're talking to someone who's a climate change skeptic, here's the reasons we should do it, even in a world where there's no such thing as climate change. And one of those reasons, like he gives, that
Pascal's
he's really
wager
big
for
on,
your mother Gaia.
yeah, right. One of the things he's talking about is how the stuff that we're dumping into the ocean because of fossil fuels, like things that are in the atmosphere that fall into the ocean and everything else, acidificate the ocean's becoming more acidic. That's got nothing to do with climate change. That has to do with what we're pumping into the air and what we're allowing for runoff, like from land into the ocean. So we can stop making it more acidic by cutting back on fossil fuels. But also with regards to coal, all of the toxins in the atmosphere that give people asthma and give people cancer and things like that, we can get rid of that too and get all of the benefits of a reduced burden on the healthcare system. And none of that has to do with climate change. So that's I would probably do a lot of that if I was in there. I'd be like, okay, we might disagree on climate change, but here's what the risks are. And here's,
let's say, if you can show somebody a balance sheet with a bottom line that can be increased in some way by going slightly greener, because like, to me, it's like, I've always, like, as a capitalist, like, it doesn't matter whether climate change is real or not. There's billions of people that are convinced that it is. So that's a customer base. And and they're going to buy power anyways. So if they want it X way or Y, and so I totally understand the arguments there. So for groundwater, obviously you're probably not going to be the most pro fracking head of the EPA, I'm guessing.
No, I am.
Oh, okay.
I am because I'm pro natural gas, because for several reasons. One of the reasons is that natural gas displaces coal. And if you were to reduce the availability of natural gas, what would happen is you would get more coal burning plants, which means more people would be inhaling toxins, which would be bad. And also you get twice the CO2 emissions into the air. So unless it's clean coal, then we're having a different story. But so I'm pro fracking for that reason.
Okay, interesting. So,
like, Hillary Clinton was pro fracking. Who's that guy? Fetterman is pro fracking.
Fracker. Yeah. No, I totally, like, as somebody that lives in the high plains.
Joe Biden is pro frack.
I like seeing that there's industry coming to the high plains. Just, I worry about, like, because, the original stories were, let's be frank, a little exaggerated about people's faucet water lighting on fire and that kind of shit. Like let's be frank, that was probably a bit of an exaggeration originally.
Well, I think
it comes
they were
from
true. I just don't
truth.
think they're. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. It's true, but also it's you're weighing the impacts of. In my view, what natural gas production in the United States is doing for national security, especially now with all that LNG going to Ukraine and stuff like that, that's way more important than how many people's faucets are on fire? Like 5? Like, I don't know.
Well, to me, I think it was probably like there's a grain of truth somewhere in there, but like it's probably not that. Now, Jacanadar, I'm going to show you something. He is so enamored with me. He's just going, ooh.
He's, what? Listen, Mr. President. Jack is a lot like you in one sense, which is to say he's a lot more reasonable on stream than he is in chat.
I like that. I resemble that remark, sir.
Yeah.
I resemble that remark because when it's face to face, we can actually drill down to it. But when it's in text, sometimes you just got to go for the jugular, and sometimes you just got to go for the laugh. And so because it's it's in text. But so okay, he's anti-fracking. Oops. Caps locks. Oh boy, are you ready to feel the fury of caps locks? But well, the thing is, I want to see to it that this is gonna be shocking, but Republican president, I want to make sure that the water that's being used to actually do the fracking is as non-toxic as humanly possible. Now, granted, there's going to be some concessions, okay? That's what I want to at least work towards. So it's kind of like when I'm talking about, I want these highly, almost indestructible solar panels because, to me, putting more old panels doesn't interest me nearly as much as okay, you spent $40 million to put out all these new panels versus you spent $40 million to make the greatest solar panel that there ever was. that's the better investment to me, because solar is the energy of 150.
Well, they're working on that. That's going to happen. Space solar panels is going to happen for sure.
I'm pro clean coal. So
there's another thing that you can do
clean
too,
coal.
is if you make the umbrella of solar panels big enough, you can blot out some percentage of the sun, which can have an impact. The reduced radiance can have an impact on surface temperature on Earth.
Well,
I'm not talking about blotting out the entire sun. I'm talking about
I've often thought about
a few pixels, you know,
something like that, just for like say, like you hear about, oh my God, New York City is going to be 127 degrees.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, and that's black asphalt and concrete, and just like putting a sail like that over the city for like 6 hours of the worst heat of the day. Now, we're getting kind of, Star Wars a little bit here, but Star Trek tech, but that's what we're getting elected for, folks, is to leave the next generation of awesome shit for all y'all. But no, that's something I've often wondered about. But yeah, like once you get out into space, then you have this massive fusion reactor that never goes away forever, or at least for a billion years or two. Not like that's much, but you're also going to have little tiny bits of space gravel going hundreds of miles an hour that's going to just destroy the whole fucking thing if it's not built right. And so that's kind of where I'm coming at. So
Starlink satellite will run into it, and then you'll be,
Yeah. So it's the technology of 150 years. It's not really the technology of today. And like, to me, if we got fusion coming, just burn the coal and then just get to the good power when it gets here. But so groundwater and fracking, interesting. And then I'm really looking forward to hearing because you and I have had some back and forth on this. Allow me to unpack this a little bit for the audience. For EVs, electric vehicles, California passed a law that was saying we're getting rid of all gas-powered vehicles by year, I don't know what it is, like 2035. And so, like I've always said, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And then I think it was the state of Wyoming or Montana. I think it was Montana. They said, we're banning all electric vehicles in our state by the year 2035. And it seemed kind of peculiar to me, but like, to me, it's like, yep, I get it. Here in this part of the country, like, yeah, fuck them electric vehicles. That's kind of how people around here just kind of look at it. So
sure,
it's part of the cultural divide, whether we like it or not.
People felt the same way about the horse and buggy back in the day. I agree.
Well, this is a little bit different because a horse is just an animal, but we're talking about the conversion of fuel to energy. Regardless, we're still arriving at the same
you described it yourself, right? Yeah, that uncle of yours or whoever it was, like
my great great grandfather.
Okay, yeah, didn't want to go to the tractor because he was attached to the horse. Yeah, I mean, these are
you can trust your horse.
We're always
like coal. You can trust your coal.
This is what there's a what's the name of this guy? I can't remember his name now, but there's a theorist. He's a Burkean conservative, and he said basically that the role of conservatives is to slow down progress. It's not to stop it. So basically what happens is there's a I shouldn't say goal. The effect of conservatism is to slow down progress. So what happens is a new thing happens. Conservatives then resist that thing, and the tug of war kind of slows down the way that it rolls forward. And he says that that's useful because it becomes a more considered, well thought out, debated march forward. So eventually you get the new thing, but you get the new thing by going through the skeptics. And he says that's the way. That's the function that conservatives have.
In response to that, like, because I've actually said this many times before, because like the progressives, like, we need to progress progressively to progressiveness in progressive forward progression. Yeah. And I'll say, well, you got to realize something though, kids, is progress is just about the last thing you need if you're heading in the wrong direction.
Right.
And so it's one of those, like, it is possible to progress to something that is worse. And that's happened a lot through history. Now, in our modern era, that's going to be a little harder, but it's not impossible. So when it comes to the EV pushback, and to me, my bigger question is, we were just talking about the rare earth subsidies and all that such. Like, to get these
Right.
batteries, to get the batteries we're going to need to actually battery power even a significant portion of this country, some moral concessions are going to have to be made. And so that's what I'm curious as to what level is my one liaison to the left in my administration. To what extent are you comfortable with that?
Well, I mean, you always have to pick your best option out of the set of options that you have, and any one of those choices is going to create winners and losers. By the way, so I don't have a problem with that. That's why I'm pro fracking. It doesn't mean I'll be pro fracking in 10 years. You know, if we have enough nuclear, and we've already phased out all of coal. When it comes to California, that law that you're talking about, I was against that, by the way. I am for subsidizing EVs, and I want EVs to compete ICE vehicles out of the market. Now, what will happen at the end? So that would be the market.
Tell my audience that doesn't know, what does ICE mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. Internal combustion engines.
Okay.
Just to write what you know of is like, gasoline.
Your car, your diesel engine, semi.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
so
funny enough,
I don't even think we need to ban any of that. Like, I think we'll get to a point where anybody who wants a gasoline car will. I think they'll be like hobby cars. It'll be like if you have a classic car today, those types of people, and they'll be able to get gas, but there won't be gas stations on every corner anymore. So you might have to drive across town to get your gas or something. But I think we'll get to the point where maybe, I don't know, 15, 20% of cars on the market are burning gas, something like that. I think
now, there's one thing that you're kind of forgetting, though, and this is the one metric. And so, like I always say, if you get the women, you have the children, and so follow the men. Chicks still find a guy in a fucking loud car sexy. Okay, and so long as that's still a thing,
people can still have that stuff. But that's not what most people use cars for, right? Like, people are buying Toyota Corollas, right, and stuff like that. But if you have a muscle
that's
car,
what 100% of people with Corvettes.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. If you have a muscle car, if you have like one of those big fancy sports cars that you like for the rumble and the perceived power and all of that, you're not going to win any drag races. EVs are going to win all of those. Any streetcar races, EVs are going to win all of those.
Why do you say that? I'm fascinated.
Have you ever seen those? Oh man!
Is it because of the lack of mass, or what?
It's because batteries to the wheel are 100% torque. There's no weighting. There's no resistance. You can even feel it on a golf cart. You've gone golfing. Like, there's no delay. You hit that thing and it just goes forward. And the first time a Tesla got into one of those streetcar races, like with somebody had a Bugatti or whatever it is,
Bugatti.
Yeah, the Bugatti lost to the stock. I mean, this is a custom muscle car that had seats taken out, all that kind of stuff is optimized to beat every race. And the very first Tesla that entered one of those things smoked it. You can see those videos on YouTube. You should look it up.
I will definitely check that out, because it
happens every time now, because you know about ludicrous mode where you hit the button and it just goes. Even without that, if you just use, if you're just driving it, it's going to beat any ICE car. So there's no contest there. But my point is, if you want one of those cars for status, and the status of those kinds of cars will go up as EVs become more common. Like right now, people look at an EV and they're like, "Oh man, that's really cool. That's kind of a luxury." It's going to flip, and it's going to be everyone has an EV, and they're going to look at those gasoline cars as really cool and like retro and whatever. But it's going to be because they're more rare. But if you just need to go to work and back, like most of us, then you're going to want an EV. In fact, our good friend Lethe, is Lethe in the chat?
I don't think he is. Maybe not.
He just bought an EV today.
Oh my!
And he lives in California, so they have a $4,500 subsidy.
I was about to say we lost another one, but he's from California. He was already lost to us.
He claimed the $7,500 subsidy from the federal government, and the old $4,500 subsidy that California was giving, it hasn't expired yet. So he caught them as they overlapped. So he got like a ridiculous price on this car. And so anyway, I think that's the way it's going to be at first. So that's what's going to kick it off. We just passed 10% EVs globally. So in
Now,
the world, 1 out of 10 cars are already EVs, like new cars sold.
son of a bit. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But no, I will say, as head of the EPA, you're going to be spending a lot of time in California. It's probably not going to have a lot to do with the EVs. It's going to have a lot to do with, can you keep enough water for everybody to drink in that state? That'll be most of your time.
Here's what I like. Here's what I would fund. I would fund those programs because, they're undergoing massive flooding right now. So they're watching a lot of this fresh water go right into the ocean. So because they don't have enough ways of capturing it. One of the ways that you can capture it is what we did here in Texas, is just make a shit ton of man-made lakes. So Texas didn't used to have a lot of lakes. Now it's full of them. And so that helps us a little bit. We still get droughts. We still have problems. But groundwater is more important. So here's what you do. They have these programs, and they're already doing this. They're just not doing it at the scale that I would like to see, where they drill these channels into low-lying areas that are above aquifers, so that when things do flood like they are now, more and more of that water can be funneled into the aquifers, and you get more groundwater. And so a second thing you can do, if you needed to, the original plan was to create these desalination plants that would be powered by solar, so they don't require it. Even better if you could put a nuclear power plant there and do it. In fact, there's a new technology. I can't remember who. Maybe it was Desperado Sensei was telling me about it. I can't remember. And these power plants would be desalinating nuclear power plants, so they could do tremendous amounts of water. Then you take that water and you pump it straight into the aquifers. So you can do it either through desalination or through relying on these massive flood events that happen in California every once in a while. And the ancillary benefit to that is, since you're funneling that water into the aquifers, you're going to be reducing flooding as well. So it's a twofer.
I mean, to me, I love the idea of aquifer recharge lakes. Actually, next to one of my great grandpa's fields, there was plans back in somewhere around the 50s to 70s to actually put a lake there, but they didn't because they said too much water would just flow into the aquifer. And I'm like, that's a good thing, you idiots.
Right, because surface water, this is, of course, I'm sure you know this, surface water will evaporate. So you'll lose some of it. But if you put it into the aquifer, you get all of it. Because it's not going to evaporate, in the aquifer.
Yeah, and you can
some of that water
when you need it.
Some of that water coming from that aquifer has been in there for 10 million years.
Oh yeah. We've got some spots in our state where the aquifer is almost 1,000 feet deep. Most of it's a couple hundred. Most of it's a few hundred feet deep. But in my area, the deepest well I've heard of was about 360 feet, and that's the deepest one I've ever heard of. Mm-hmm. Usually, it's give or take about 200. And I gotta tell you, that water when it comes out of there, whew, boy, fresh, cold, cool, and unlike any you've ever tasted.
We need aqueducts.
Yes, the aqueduct.
There's something about aqueducts that actually would fit California really well. I think, if you're in a Napa Valley vineyard and then there's a big aqueduct in the background, that'd be kind of cool.
I think even if a few vineyard owners would say they didn't like this ruining the scenery, they'd sure love the water. They'd sure love having water that they could use. So, now I actually have a bottle of 2015 Napa Valley Cab, which was from one of the vineyards that got burned down, unfortunately. So I'm hanging on to that bad boy. Yeah. So, but
inauguration day.
Yes. Actually, on inauguration day, it'd probably be something like George T. Stagg or William LaRue Weller. That'd be my one toast at lunchtime. And then, because normally I say while the sun is up, that's not a good time to drink. That's generally my rule. If the sun's up, I don't drink. If the sun goes down, now it's a good time for it. But, on the day I get inaugurated, I might enjoy a toddy at lunch. But we've covered batteries. We've covered all kinds. We've covered groundwater. We've covered space. I mean, we've covered I think, Ico, you're hired. You are now my head of the EPA.
We agree on a surprising amount of stuff when it comes to energy.
Yes. There's some things that to me, it's coal ain't so bad, and to you it's like, let's get rid of it. And so like that's something we kind of disagree on, but
Right.
we're
But
not-
here's how I would pitch it to you if I were going to try to sell you on it. I wouldn't even say anything about coal. I'd just tell you about nuclear, which is the thing that's going to displace coal. Like coal, like already is on its last legs. But if we started scaling nuclear, which is baseload, which is exactly as useful as coal, then at that point, coal could not survive. So I wouldn't even have to say anything about coal. I would just say, hey, let's invest heavily in nuclear.
Interesting. Now I'm gonna say before we move on to
And we can frack our way out of coal too.
Before we move on to a few other things I wanted to ask, I'm curious, is there any last things you'd like to tell the American people as what your prerogatives are as head of the EPA? Any last final parting words as head of the EPA before we shift conversation a bit?
Only that we haven't talked much about transportation yet, but I would continue the EV subsidies, and it would be a 10-year time frame for having majority EVs on the road.
Okay. That one, like that. Like,
I waited until after you hired me to say that one.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, all right, well, we'll have to have a couple talks on that one. But yes, folks, this is the cabinet meeting of Phil K.O.E. and Icowrich, and the new head of the EPA. And pause for edit. All right.
Smooths itself out.
Back. Tell you what I'll do if I ever get back. I promise to refabricate you, raging rivers of gold. That's what the brochure advertised. And now we're lost, we gotta take it down. Let you down slow, it's hard to survive. El Dorado. Oh, Lord. Well, let's see how that one went.
Yeah.